Mr. President.
The senator from Alaska.
Mr. President, a couple days ago I came to the floor to talk about the partial government shutdown, how it's impacting different parts of my state, the great state of Alaska, and in particular how it is impacting the men and women of the U.S. Coast Guard. Now, I think we all recognize as we're trying to work through this partial government shutdown that a lot of federal workers are being impacted. But let me talk about the Coast Guard because I think it's a little different. It's a little different than almost any other group of federal workers. On Tuesday, these brave men and women did not receive a paycheck. They didn't receive a paycheck, and they are the only branch of the U.S. military right now out there around the world, around the globe, risking their lives for the American people who are not getting paid. Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, we love them all. They're working hard. They're getting paid. Men and women of the Coast Guard are not getting paid. That's wrong. That's particularly wrong. They can't leave the Coast Guard. They'd get court-martialed. They're working hard, saving lives, in my state, certainly in Alaska, all the time, and they're not getting paid when the other services are getting paid. So what did we do? A number of us, Democrats, Republicans, almost 1/4 of the members of the U.S. Senate, Mr. President, co-sponsored a bill that says, let's pay the Coast Guard. Let's pay the Coast Guard right now so they're treated fairly like the other men and women serving in our military. So that was a good start. I was optimistic then. It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride. But to be honest, Mr. President, I couldn't imagine that this bill wouldn't sail through. Okay, we're not going to be able to fix everything right now, but this is one we can start working on these individual issues. And there's a lot of talk of doing that. So last week I had the opportunity to raise this with the President and his administration, Secretary of Homeland Security, and we continued to press this issue all week. OMB Director, Chief of Staff of the White House, the President himself, and then he said this week he was going to support the bill. That's important. Now you have the executive branch, the President of the United States, he'll sign it. He said it. Matter of fact, I was in a meeting with him yesterday. He said he's 100% supportive of this bill. Bipartisan, actually more Democrats than Republicans on the bill right now. So what we did, trying to move this quickly, is that we said, all right, President's going to sign it, court of the Senate, bipartisan bill, let's move it. We moved to hotline it. What does that mean? It tries to get this bill to be moved through unanimous consent through the Senate. A hotline means we're going to try and move it real fast. Everybody's going to vote on it. So that started today, and by noon, every Republican member of the U.S. Senate said, good to go, cleared hot, let's pay the men and women of the Coast Guard. So I had the opportunity to talk to a local public radio program in Kodiak, one of the largest Coast Guard stations in the country. Actually, it is the largest in the country. And I had the opportunity to say to my fellow Alaskans, hey, I'm pretty optimistic. We've moved. A lot of co-sponsors, 25% of the Senate, Democrats, Republicans, President of the United States, and bingo. Republicans have said we're good to go on it. And so I certainly started working with some of my Democratic colleagues who are also optimistic. Well, why would we block this? Why would we block this? Remember, the only men and women in the U.S. military not getting paid right now. And we have a solution. So, Mr. President, I come to the floor, and I hate to admit it, because 2 hours ago I was pretty optimistic, but I'm getting word that my colleagues, the Democrats, the minority leader, are now saying, maybe we're just going to block this. Not sure why. Nobody's come down here to say why. We're running the hotline on the Democratic side, so maybe that's just a rumor. I hope it's just a rumor. Why would you block it? Come on, my colleagues on the other side, why would you block it? We're not going to fix everything tonight, but we could fix this tonight. Let me just talk a little bit about, just in my state, Some of you have probably seen The Deadliest Catch and those kind of shows about Alaska. Look at the men and women who are out there keeping our fishermen, American fishermen, safe. On average, every month in the state of Alaska, the Coast Guard saves 22 lives. 1 month, on average. One state assists 53 people, reports and investigates 25 maritime casualties, conducts close to 20 security boardings and over 20 security patrols. If you're in trouble on the high seas in Alaska, which is a bad place to be, the seas are never too rough or the sky's never too dismal for the Coast Guard to come out and rescue you. We've seen it time and time again. But it's not just in Alaska, Mr. President. As you know, it's all over the country, and it's all over the world. I talked to the Commandant of the Coast Guard just yesterday. Said, Mr. Commandant, Admiral, I think we're close. The President's good to go. I think most of the senators are good to go. Bill has 25 co-sponsors. He reminded me he's got men and women of the Coast Guard deployed in the Persian Gulf doing anti-piracy operations alongside U.S. Marines and U.S. Navy personnel. Right now. Persian Gulf, Marines, Coast Guard, Navy. And guess who's not getting paid? Does anyone think that that should be a tolerated situation? The answer is no. The answer is no. So again, I just hope this is a rumor and that the hotline that's happening right now on the Democratic side, again, we've cleared it. Good to go. Every Republican has signed off on this, that this is just a rumor. That tonight, the Democrats will clear this, we'll get it to the House. The Coast Guard says they can start cutting checks again within 24 hours. The President will sign this. So there should be no reason, Mr. President, not to do this. Now, as you know, the partial government shutdown is negatively impacting federal workers. The President's request, in my view, for border security is eminently reasonable. And I'm hopeful the Speaker will start to view it that way. I know a lot of her members are. We're all working this. We're all working for a solution. Senator Johnson put out a bill that I joined as a co-sponsor that would immediately pay all workers who are currently working without pay. So this would expand the idea of what we're doing with the Coast Guard bill. I think it's a good idea. That's a start. But the Coast Guard bill right now has momentum. It has momentum. We could get this done in 24 hours, Mr. President. It's not a complete solution, but we have the White House, which should be the Senate, and hopefully the House, getting ready, being ready to find a solution, at least for some of the men and women in the federal workforce. But, Mr. President, as I like to emphasize, they're not just any federal workers. All of them are important, there's no doubt. But when you're the only members of the military not getting paid for risking your life for your country, and we can fix it here tonight in the Senate, that's what we should be doing. I certainly hope this bill isn't being blocked unreasonably. As I mentioned, it's not a complete solution, but it's the start of a solution. For the life of me, I can't understand why this bill would be blocked. And more importantly, the men and women of the Coast Guard will not understand why this bill is being blocked. And the communities that support and depend on the Coast Guard, like Kodiak, Alaska, will not understand why this bill is being blocked. These are young men and women who love their country, have chosen to serve and protect us. They're not going to understand why this bill is being blocked tonight. So, Mr. President, I don't want to use the word plead, but I am asking my colleagues on the Democratic side to do the right thing, pass this bill tonight, Every single American who's aware of this situation knows that it's inequitable. When the other members of the military are out there risking their lives, just like the men and women of the Coast Guard are, and they're getting paid, and the men and women of the Coast Guard aren't. We are on the verge of a solution. Passing this bill will take care of at least one issue that we're all trying to resolve. And I again urge my colleagues, my Democratic colleagues, because all of my Republican colleagues have already passed this bill in the hotline, I urge my colleagues to take up this bill, do the right thing, and support the men and women of the Coast Guard who are not being treated equal like their brothers and sisters in the other branches of the military. Until then, Mr. President, I'm going to continue to fight for this. I'm going to continue to raise the issue. As I mentioned, we've made a lot of progress, including getting the White House and the President on board, getting all of our members here on the Republican side of the Senate on board, and I'm hopeful with more advocacy, more reasoning with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle that we'll also get there. Move this to the House quickly and get the men and women the paychecks, the men and women of the Coast Guard the paychecks that they're needing. I yield the floor.